since I've been a little kid, you know, I had these dreams and I could tell kind of futuristic, and I would write them in a diary. And usually when they started to come to pass, I would feel a deja vu feeling. And I'd actually see a deja vu thing, and then I'd go, oh my heck, I wonder if I had a dream of that. And I'd go back in my diary, my dream bureau, had that date, and exactly. And so I've had these up to 15 minutes, where I've actually just know what the person's going to say for 15 minutes in a row, to even 5 minutes before the event even happens. So one time on my mission, it was the last, I was heading home, and as I was getting ready to head out, I had this dream, and in this dream, I have this Book of Mormon, and I'm holding the Book of Mormon. It's got gold lettering on it and all that, and this stewardess, she keeps coming by, and she's looking on the plane. She keeps looking at this Book of Mormon, and I'd turn pages and that kind of thing, and she'd look at it, and I says, what's going on here? In the dream, I was kind of, why is she looking? And then at the very end of the dream, she comes and she sits. Somehow she's sitting, facing all of us on the plane, and I just take that Book of Mormon and I turn to her and I said, you're supposed to have this Book of Mormon. And I give her this Book of Mormon, and she looks at it and she starts kind of tearing up, and she gets all emotional, starts telling me stuff, and I wake up and I go, wow, I got to get this Book of Mormon to this girl. And so I call the mission leader, and he says, oh, I think there's a friend of mine that has one, or a little Tongan guy, and he says, oh, if you don't give this away, you know, I want it back. And I says, oh, I'll make sure you get it back, no problem, if it doesn't happen. And so I take off, and we're on this plane, and I do exactly that. The Spirit's telling me, kind of change the pages, and she sees the pages, and she says, she kind of said something to me about the book, and then she walked on by it. And so I thought, well, here we go. And so she came in, and I was looking for a chair, how she's supposed to face this way, but she pulls something out of the thing there, and she sits on this little goofy chair, and she's looking at us. And here I get this little fear factor going on, like I got to give this to this girl, and I'm like, oh no. And so I just feel it, and then she's looking at me. We're starting to land in Hawaii, and I hand the book to her, and I said, you're supposed to have this book. And she takes this book and she looks at it, and she started to just cry. And she's just like, oh my goodness. And then she tells us that she grew up in Hawaii, and all of her friends were LDS, and she went to seminary, and she went to all these things, and for all these years, and nobody gave her a Book of Mormon, and nobody ever asked her to join the church. And I said, well, in the Book of Mormon there's a little card, and it has the phone number of the mission here in Hawaii. And so just call them, and they'll baptize you, and you'll be a member of the church. How's that? And she just smiled, she got all excited. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. And then, and so, it was pretty cool. I got that experience. And so then I got off the plane, and there was a sister missionary who was like well known. She baptized lots of people, and she walks up to me and she goes, wow, that was incredible. I just never even seen anything like that. And I says, all a day's work.
Would you call it a personal revelation?
Yeah. In fact, Dad dedicated one of his books, or called it the book Gift of Dreams. And he wrote it kind of after some of the weird dreams that I'd had in the future. And I just kept telling him these stories and everything. And it's really interesting because I had an experience, and I never told this story, but anyway, there's this guy I met at Sunstone. And at Sunstone, he walks up to me and he goes, you're Kevin Kraut. And I go, yeah? And he says, well, and he has a Russian accent. And this Russian accent is pretty strong, and he says, well, I know all about you, and I want to, talk to you about this. And so he says, well, go ahead, tell me about how you know me and why you know me and everything else. And he says, well, I used to work for the KGB. And he says, we were spying on your dad, because your dad had a lot of information in Dugway, because he was like high up or whatever. And so anyway, so we were doing this, and then we kept hearing these stories about his son and the little weird things that he did, and he saw things in the future, and how you started to learn that. And so we started focusing on you. And so we started listening, and so he started doing this whole thing and went through this process, and he said, we, the KGB, we learned from your journals, and we learned from this, and we learned how that worked, and then we started implementing that into our soldiers, and then they began where they could start seeing through dreams future events. And he said, can you imagine how powerful that would be for the military to be able to see the future? And I says, yeah, that would be pretty good, to have that. And he says, I believe in Mormonism and everything, but I don't believe that it's all just God. I believe there's methods of how this works. And so we had a website, and he taught this, and he was a master mind person, did all this. It was very interesting. And he said, by the way, there's a movie that was made after you, or about you, that you don't even know about. And I said, what's that? And he says, we gave information to Hollywood. Didn't tell who, didn't tell what, but it was about an individual who saw things about 5 minutes in the future. I don't know what the movie is, I can't remember. Anyway, it was so like right here I had one where I was sitting in the store, and my wife was coming in the door, and she had all this foods and this and that, and she was walking in, and I'm just kind of staring at her, in this dream, and then she walks in with all her, I don't know, have like a waitress or something, and anyway she's carrying all this, and she gives me this look like, thanks a lot for opening the door, I didn't open the door, and so she says, and so then she went by in the dream. So I wake up, and I'm like, that was kind of a weird dream. And, because I just barely went for just a second. And so I thought, that's incredible. I wonder what that's all about. So I went back doing stuff. 5 minutes later, I look up, and I'm feeling that deja vu feeling, and she's coming, and she's got all this stuff. and then she's walking in the door, and I'm just kind of like, wow, this is happening. I mean, really, really detail how I had seen it. And, some are not so detailed, but I had that, and I was like, oh my heck, that's just incredible. And that's why I didn't open the door, because I was going through the deja vu feeling, And
well, what do you feel would happen if you did open the door?
I don't know. Because it kind of just happens the way that it is in the dream. I mean, I have broke into some of the future, and changed things. Like,
so instance, you have kind of like seen that you would do something.
Yeah, like on my mission, where there was a guy, an elder that I was with, and he, in the dream, he steps out and gets hit by a bus. And we didn't get along too good, so I woke up the next morning and I said, hey, Elder, I had this dream you got hit by a bus. And that didn't go very well. He goes, oh yeah, thanks, Elder Kraut, yeah. And I go, no, that came out wrong. And I said, no, I'm going to protect you. I'm not going to let that happen. And he says, okay, well, we'll see. So 4 days later, he's still making fun of me and doing all this. I just can't get it to work. And so I thought, well, maybe it's not going to happen. And then I heard gonging on the chimes on the clock. And that threw me into the deja vu feeling. And as soon as I felt that, I just reached out and grabbed this guy, pulled him back. And here comes the bus swinging by. And I mean, the bus driver slams on the brakes, and it's in Auckland, New Zealand, where there's a big road, and he just, this bus driver, he's just freaked out. Who's that? Well, I know I hit him, and I, no, he's okay. And so I said, so here's the Book of Mormon. He goes, oh, okay. Kind of funny. I said, I had a dream about it. And so after that, boy, he didn't say anything to me. He didn't. The guy, he was just quiet.
I'm not going to make fun of this guy
anymore. So another dream, and I tell that if I can get the sound here right. And this is kind of an interesting dream, because I had this dream, and it was an Indian princess that had a red dot on her from India, and she had all this garb on, and she comes to the door, And she invites us in, and we teach her the gospel, and all these things happen. And there's a big feast, that night. And so I tell my companion about this, and he goes, "Oh, feast, huh? Well, let's go find that." So we're out tracting that day, and I'm going along, and there's this hill, and there's this white house, and he looks up and he goes, "Is that the house?" And I look and I go, "Oh my heck, it is." So he goes, man, he's all excited. He goes running up there and he knocks on the door, and this butler comes or something, and he kind of shut the door, and like, that's weird, and then I hear the lady go, no, open the door, and he opens the door, and then she points at me and says, "That's the young man I had the dream about last night."
That makes things a lot easier.
Do you still have these dreams?
Yeah, not as often. I gotta get a little. And so she says, and so my companion goes, "Well, he had a dream about you." And she goes, "Really?" And he says, "Yeah." And then there was this big feast, and she goes, "There is a big feast. That's why she was all dressed up, And she says, "We're going to have that tonight." I'm rehearsing, and she goes, come in." And she came in, and we talked and taught her a little bit about us and whatnot. And she says, "You can be our honored guest for tonight." And so we could talk about America, And, oh, that's, are you heading? Thanks. Good to see you, Bill.
When you find out about the
So then we go in, and there's this feast that's happening, and she says, "We want you to be our invited guests. And so you come and talk about America." We came in and we talked about Arizona. I'm from Arizona, and I can't remember where he was from, but we talked about all the neat things of America. And then we began to teach them. We had the dinner that night and did that, and then we taught about the Book of Mormon and Joseph Smith, and we started teaching. And the husband was very astute, very intelligent, just sharp guy. He got through everything, and he got to this point, and he goes, he didn't understand too much English, so it was good, but there was things we wanted to make sure he knew. And so there was a bishop that was Indian, and so we're teaching him, and he's speaking, the lingo, and when we got done, at the very end, I was teaching about tithing. I was telling him stories about tithing. And he stops and he goes,
So I just need to cut these in half.
I believe everything. I believe the United Order. It all flows into the old religions, all this is what it is. And I would join the church, but politically I can't do that. And I said, "Why?" And he goes, "Because he was like a king of India, or he was a magistrate. There's a name for it." And he goes,
A political official?
"What is it?"
Just a political, like a member of parliament?
Yeah, he's like up. He's like a king. He's like a high up. He goes, I just can't do that, in my position. And they'd already had some missionaries in India and that kind of thing. But what's interesting is I was at my little shop here, my copy center, I was copying a journal with a guy that's on a mission. And he said, in India, and he said, what's interesting about this whole thing is that I went to India. Oh, and then I saw in the journal, I saw this picture of this guy. I don't know this guy. I taught him and all this. And he goes, "You taught him?" And I said, "Yeah, I had this dream about his wife and blah, blah, blah." And he goes, "You're the missionary that had the dream about the wife?" And I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "Oh my gosh, he's like the high up. He's like a king." And he said, "Because you're like a legend in India." And he goes, "Because of that, he allowed a lot of LDS people to come in and preach the gospel there. He was the one that influenced that to happen."